Dexter Morgan is a paradox. He's a serial killer, but he's also a hero, a man who wraps his victims in plastic and ends their lives. Yet we cheer for him. Why? How can someone so dark become someone we empathize with? How does he make us love him? From the very first episode, Dexter's charm is undeniable. His wit, his dedication as a father and brother, and his seemingly genuine interactions with others make us believe he's more than his darkness. He channels his urges into something that feels like justice, targeting criminals who slip through the cracks. But ask yourself this: would you forgive a murderer in real life if they only killed bad people? Dexter walks a moral tightrope, and somehow, we're right there with him. What's scarier than a wolf in sheep's clothing? A wolf who doesn't know he's dangerous. Dexter's charm isn't just about his actions, it's about his vulnerability. Beneath the darkness, we see glimpses of a man who craves connection, who desires love. He's not a monster devoid of emotion, he's a man trying to understand it. And isn't that a journey we all recognize? Take his relationship with Rita, for example. Dexter's awkward yet endearing attempts to maintain a facade of normalcy showcase a man desperately trying to blend in. He takes her bowling, cooks her breakfast, and shows up to her kids' school events. On the surface, he seems like the perfect partner. But beneath that charming exterior lies a man battling his darkness. Rita herself often comments on how safe Dexter makes her feel, which is ironic considering his secret life. Isn't this a reflection of how we often see only what we want to see in others? And then there's his bond with Lumen. Unlike Rita, Lumen knows Dexter's secret, yet she doesn't recoil in horror. Instead, she sees his darkness as a mirror of her own trauma. Their connection goes beyond romance. It's a partnership rooted in shared pain and a need for justice. This relationship highlights Dexter's capacity to love deeply, but it also underscores how his darkness shapes his ability to connect with others. What does it say about Dexter, or about us, that we root for him in these moments? Think about Dexter's awkward attempts at being a boyfriend to Rita or a father to Harrison. There's an almost childlike quality to Dexter's struggle to fit into a world that doesn't quite understand him. We've all felt that way at some point, haven't we? Trying to navigate relationships, longing to belong while feeling like an outsider. Dexter's vulnerability goes beyond his awkwardness, though. It's in the way he questions his own worth. Does he deserve love? Can someone like him ever truly be loved? His relationship with Harrison is perhaps the most poignant example of this struggle. Dexter genuinely wants to be a good father, but he's constantly haunted by the fear that his darkness will consume his son. The scene where Dexter holds a blood-stained Harrison after Rita's death is a heartbreaking moment that captures his internal conflict. In that moment, he isn't just a father. He's a man terrified that his actions have doomed his child. Haven't we all, in some way, feared that our flaws could hurt the people we love? His conversations with Rita often lay this bare. He masks his darkness, presenting a facade of normalcy, but there's an undercurrent of desperation. He wants to be seen, not as a monster, but as someone who's capable of good. And that's what makes his struggle so relatable. Haven't we all, at some point, tried to present the best version of ourselves to the world, hiding the parts we fear others wouldn't accept? Consider the way Dexter interacts with his co-workers at Miami Metro. He's affable, helpful, and even humorous, often diffusing tense situations with a well-timed quip. These moments show how expertly Dexter plays the role of the harmless forensics expert. Yet, every time he steps into his lab and examines blood spatter, we're reminded of the chilling reality beneath the surface. It's a duality that mirrors our own lives in smaller ways. How we present one version of ourselves to the world while hiding the struggles we fear would make us unlovable. But here's the deeper question. Is Dexter really different from the people he kills? His victims often wear masks of their own, hiding monstrous actions behind veneers of respectability. By exposing and eliminating them, Dexter isn't just serving justice, he's validating his own existence. If they deserve to die, then his darkness serves a purpose. But does it? Or is he just another killer rationalizing his actions through a personal code? Now let's make this personal. How often do we mask our own flaws or suppress our impulses to fit into society's expectations? How many of our actions are driven by a desire to be accepted or loved? Dexter's story forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions. Imagine you were in his shoes. Would you do anything differently? If you had a dark passenger, would you try to suppress it? Or would you, like Dexter, find a way to live with it? And here's another thought. If someone you loved revealed a secret as dark as Dexter's, how far would you go to protect them? Would you rationalize their actions as Dexter does, convincing yourself that their darkness serves a greater good? Or would you walk away, Dexter challenges us not just to judge him, but to evaluate our own capacity for empathy and forgiveness. But here's where it gets even more complex. Dexter's love isn't ordinary. It's powerful, but it's also tainted by guilt, by secrecy. His devotion to Harrison, Deborah, and even his warped respect for Harry's code shows us a side of him that's deeply human. His love is real, but it's fragile, held together by lies and the constant threat of exposure. Consider his relationship with Deborah. She's more than just his sister. She's his moral compass, his anchor. Yet, their bond is riddled with complexity. He lies to her, deceives her, and ultimately betrays her trust. But he does it out of love, or so he tells himself. When Deborah finally discovers Dexter's secret, the fallout is catastrophic. She's forced to reconcile the brother she loves with the killer she now knows him to be. And Dexter? He's left grappling with the knowledge that his actions have shattered the one person who has always been his constant. This dynamic lays bare a haunting question. Can love truly survive when it's built on deception? This duality is what makes Dexter so fascinating. His relationships are both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. His love grounds him, giving him a reason to strive for normalcy, but it also exposes him. The closer he gets to someone, the more he risks them uncovering his secret. And when his carefully constructed world begins to crack, the results are devastating. Take his relationship with Rita. At first, it seems perfect. She offers Dexter a sense of stability, a way to blend into society. But as Dexter grows closer to her, the pressure of maintaining his double life mounts. His lies multiply, and his ability to keep his worlds separate begins to falter. When Rita ultimately becomes a victim, not of Dexter's actions, but of the darkness he draws into their lives, it's a devastating reminder of the cost of connection. Deborah's discovery of Dexter's secret pushes this dynamic even further. Unlike Rita, Deborah knows Dexter on a deeper level. She's seen his best and worst moments, and she's always stood by him. But when she learns the truth, their bond is tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Her love for Dexter forces her to make impossible choices. Choices that blur the line between loyalty and complicity. And for Dexter, her knowledge of his secret becomes both a lifeline and a burden. He wants her to understand him, but at what cost to her own morality? Ultimately, Dexter's relationships reveal the dual nature of love. It can heal, but it can also destroy. His connections to Deborah, Harrison, and Rita each highlight different facets of this truth. Love gives Dexter a reason to strive for something better, but it also lays bare the cracks in his carefully constructed life. And for us as viewers, it forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that love, when intertwined with secrecy and darkness, can be as much a curse as it is a gift. Would we act any differently in his shoes? If our love made us vulnerable, would we still embrace it? Or would we, like Dexter, try to balance the tightrope of connection and self-preservation? These are the questions Dexter compels us to wrestle with, and they're what make his story so endlessly compelling. Dexter's love for his son is perhaps the most humanizing aspect of his character, but it's also the most tragic. While he strives to protect his son from the world's darkness, the haunting question remains: is he shielding Harrison from danger or from himself? Take the moment Dexter teaches Harrison about Harry's code. On the surface, it's fatherly guidance, a way to help Harrison survive. But beneath it lies a chilling truth. By involving his son, Dexter isn't just protecting him. He's pulling him into the very darkness he's tried to escape. Dexter's actions often have devastating ripple effects. His decision to kill Trinity, for instance, leads to Rita's death, leaving Harrison motherless and forever scarred. This raises a painful question. Can love, no matter how well-intentioned, ever justify the harm it causes? This tension creates a powerful dynamic. On one hand, we're rooting for Dexter to succeed as a father. We want him to provide Harrison with the stable, loving childhood that Dexter himself never had. On the other, we're terrified of what might happen if Dexter's darkness bleeds into Harrison's life. Every interaction between them feels like a tightrope walk, a delicate balance between love and danger. Take, for instance, the scene where Dexter decides to leave Harrison with Hannah. On one level, it feels like an act of selflessness, Dexter recognizing that his presence endangers his son. But on another level, it's a moment of profound failure. By leaving Harrison, Dexter isn't just protecting him, he's abandoning him. This act forces viewers to confront their own feelings about parenthood. Is it better to stay and risk harming your child, or to leave and risk leaving them vulnerable in a different way? Dexter's struggle as a parent mirrors a universal truth. Parenting is a constant balancing act. We all want to protect the people we love, but in doing so, we risk overstepping, controlling, or even hurting them. Dexter's story amplifies this struggle, forcing us to ask, how much of our parenting decisions are truly for our children's benefit, and how much are driven by our own fears and guilt? Dexter's ability to love forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about morality. Can love redeem someone who's done unspeakable things? Or does it simply mask their darkness? His love for Harrison feels pure, but it's tangled in the same web of secrecy and violence that defines the rest of his life. Take the hypothetical. If someone you loved revealed a dark secret, like Dexter's, how far would you go to protect them? Would you excuse their actions, rationalizing that their intentions were good? Or would you walk away, knowing that staying might make you complicit? Dexter compels us to think about these moral dilemmas in deeply personal terms. At what point does empathy become enabling? Dexter's story blurs this line, particularly in his relationships with Harrison and Deborah. Both characters know parts of Dexter's truth, yet their love for him clouds their judgment. For Harrison, this manifests as a growing understanding of his father's darkness, leaving viewers to wonder, is Harrison destined to repeat his father's mistakes because he loves and admires him? Or can love provide a way out of this cycle? Dexter's story suggests that love, while powerful, isn't always enough to overcome darkness. But it also shows us that love can be a guiding force, a reason to strive for something better. Dexter's love for Harrison is what keeps him tethered to his humanity, even as his dark passenger threatens to consume him. In the end, Dexter's journey as a parent is one of paradoxes. His love is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, his salvation and his curse. And for us as viewers, it's a mirror that forces us to ask, how far would we go to protect the people we love, and at what cost? But let's take this a step further. What if love isn't just a redeeming force for Dexter? What if it's his greatest weakness? Love doesn't just make him human, it makes him vulnerable. It clouds his judgment, compels him to take risks, and blinds him to danger. It's through love that people like Lila and Hannah gain power over him, exploiting his need for connection to push him toward chaos. Yet, paradoxically, it's also love that keeps him tethered to his humanity. Without it, he might lose himself entirely to the dark passenger. Take Lila, for instance. Her ability to manipulate Dexter stems from his desperate desire to be understood. She exploits his loneliness, weaving herself into his life by presenting her own darkness as something compatible with his. In her, Dexter briefly sees the possibility of someone who might accept all of him. But Lila's love isn't genuine. It's possessive, destructive. Her obsession with Dexter ultimately threatens to unravel the very stability he's worked so hard to maintain. In loving Lila, Dexter lets his guard down, and in doing so, he almost loses everything. Hannah, on the other hand, is a more complex reflection of this dynamic. Unlike Lila, Hannah doesn't just exploit Dexter's vulnerability, she shares it. Their relationship is built on mutual understanding, on the acknowledgement of their shared darkness. But this too has its dangers. Dexter's love for Hannah blurs the boundaries of his code, forcing him to question its limits. If he can love someone who is killed, doesn't that make him a hypocrite? And if she can accept his darkness, does that mean he can accept it too? Dexter's relationships reflect the duality of human connection. Love can heal, but it can also destroy. It can bring out the best in us, but it can also expose our flaws. For Dexter, love is both a sanctuary and a battlefield. His bond with Deborah, for instance, highlights this tension. She's his anchor, the person who knows him best and loves him most. Yet, when she discovers his secret, that love becomes a source of unbearable conflict. Deborah's struggle to reconcile the brother she adores with the killer she's learned he is forces her, and the audience, to confront the limits of unconditional love. How much darkness can love endure before it collapses under its own weight? Then there's Harrison. Dexter's love for his son reveals another facet of this duality. As much as he wants to protect Harrison, his very presence threatens to expose him to the same darkness that defines Dexter's life. Love drives Dexter to shield his son from the world, but it also blinds him to the ways his actions ripple through Harrison's life. Is this love, or is it selfishness masquerading as protection? Dexter's story compels us to wrestle with these uncomfortable questions, forcing us to examine the cracks in our own definitions of love and morality. In the end, Dexter's love isn't pure. It's complicated, messy, and often destructive. But that's precisely what makes it so compelling. It's not the love of a hero who sacrifices everything for the greater good. It's the love of a man caught between two worlds, struggling to reconcile his need for connection with the weight of his secrets. This love forces us to confront our own ideas about morality. How far would we go for the people we care about? Would we excuse their darkness, rationalize their actions, or draw a line that even love cannot cross? At what point does love become toxic? Dexter's psyche is a labyrinth where love and fear coexist in a delicate balance. His love drives him to protect, but it also blinds him to the consequences of his actions. It compels him to connect, but it also creates vulnerabilities that his enemies exploit. And perhaps most tragically, it forces him to see the man he wishes he could be, a man unburdened by the dark passenger, but never truly allows him to become that man. And perhaps that's what draws us to Dexter. We see our own struggles reflected in his. His story forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we often suppress, the moral compromises we make, the lies we tell ourselves to justify our actions, the fear that our flaws will outweigh our virtues. Dexter's journey isn't just about his darkness, it's about the light he desperately clings to, the love that keeps him human even as it threatens to consume him. It's a reminder that love, for all its beauty and power, is never simple. It's messy, it's flawed, and sometimes it's dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we can't look away. Before we continue exploring why we love Dexter despite his darkness, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month, so I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. Dexter isn't just a man. He's a mirror. Why do we love him? Because he reflects the parts of ourselves we're afraid to admit. The anger we feel at injustice. The impulses we suppress. Dexter gives those feelings a voice, a path, and somehow, we find it satisfying. He lets us explore the parts of ourselves we bury under social expectations and moral codes. But what does it say about us that we root for him? Is it simply his charm, or is it something deeper? A reflection of our own struggles with morality, control, and justice. But let's take a closer look. Why is it satisfying? Is it because we see Dexter as a vigilante, someone who serves justice when the system fails? Or is it because he's fulfilling a fantasy most of us would never admit to having? The fantasy of ultimate control, not just over others, but over our own darkest instincts. Dexter's actions give shape to emotions we often bury, providing a sense of release we'd never dare to pursue in real life. Think about it. How many times have you felt powerless in the face of injustice? Whether it's watching a criminal walk free or experiencing a personal betrayal, we've all had moments where we wish we could take matters into our own hands. Dexter doesn't just wish, he acts. He becomes the judge, jury, and executioner. It's a disturbing kind of power, but it's also intoxicating. And as viewers, we're drawn to it, even if we don't want to admit it. This fantasy of control is what sets Dexter apart. Unlike the chaos of the real world, where justice is often flawed or incomplete, Dexter creates a world where wrongs are righted, even if the methods are horrifying. He appeals to a primal desire for order, for fairness. But here's the catch. His sense of justice isn't universal. It's deeply personal, guided by his own moral code. And that's where the fantasy starts to crumble. What happens when personal vendettas cloud judgment? How far can someone like Dexter go before his quest for justice becomes pure self-indulgence? Every time Dexter targets a predator or a murderer, we feel a fleeting sense of justice. But deep down, we know justice isn't so black and white. The Code of Harry is presented as a moral framework, a way to channel Dexter's darkness toward a greater good. But is it really justice, or just a way for Dexter to justify his actions? Take the case of Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Dexter's pursuit of him isn't just about protecting society, it's personal. Arthur represents the darkness Dexter fears in himself, a man who has embraced his impulses without restraint. In killing Arthur, Dexter isn't just delivering justice, he's reassuring himself that he's different, that he's better. But is he? Or is the only difference between Dexter and his victims the thin veneer of the code he follows? This fragility extends to the audience's perception of justice. How many of us rationalize Dexter's actions because he targets bad people? And what does that say about us? Dexter forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about morality. If the system fails, does that give someone the right to take matters into their own hands? And if so, Where do we draw the line? Take his dark passenger. It isn't just a label for his compulsions, it's a metaphor for the human condition. It's a reminder of how we all wrestle with our darker impulses. How many times have you felt anger simmering beneath the surface, only to suppress it because society demands composure? Dexter doesn't suppress it, he channels it. And while his methods are extreme, isn't there a part of us that envies his freedom to act on those impulses? The dark passenger represents more than Dexter's urge to kill. It's a symbol of the internal struggles we all face. Jealousy, anger, fear, these emotions live within us, influencing our actions in subtle and not so subtle ways. Most of us keep them in check, but Dexter's story asks, what if you couldn't? What if those impulses had a voice, a power over your life? Would you resist, or would you, like Dexter, find a way to coexist with them? And here's the irony. Dexter isn't free. His dark passenger isn't just a burden, it defines him. Every choice he makes, every relationship he builds, is shaped by its presence. Even when he strives for normalcy, like in his life with Rita, the tension of his secret threatens to unravel everything. The more he tries to connect, the greater the risk of collapse. This paradox is central to Dexter's existence. The dark passenger gives him purpose in a chaotic world, yet it also imprisons him, keeping him from truly living. And isn't that something we all wrestle with? The burdens we carry, whether regrets, fears, or hidden flaws, have a way of shaping our lives more than we'd like to admit. Dexter compels us to ask, how much of our lives are driven by what we suppress? And if we could shed those parts of ourselves, would we even recognize who we've become? Dexter's brilliance lies in this duality. He's both a monster and a mirror, reflecting the anger, frustration, and desire for control that we often bury. By rooting for him, we're forced to confront unsettling truths about ourselves. How far would we go to right the wrongs we've faced? Could we resist the pull of our own darkness? And if we couldn't, would we be able to live with who we became? In Dexter's struggle, we see a reflection of our own, a constant battle between who we are and who we want to be. And maybe that's why we can't look away. And what about his victims? They're not just criminals. They're reflections of what Dexter fears most, losing control. By eliminating them, he's not just serving justice. He's creating a sense of separation between himself and the monsters he hunts. But is that separation real? Or is it just a story Dexter tells himself to justify his actions? Take Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Arthur's ability to live a double life, a loving family man by day, a remorseless killer by night, mirrors Dexter's own existence. But where Dexter clings to the code of Harry as a way to rationalize his actions, Arthur fully embraces his darkness. Killing Arthur isn't just about stopping a predator. It's about proving to himself that he's different. But is he? Or is the only difference between Dexter and Arthur the rules Dexter chooses to follow? And what about the moments when Dexter falters, when his emotions cloud his judgment? There are times when his kills feel less like justice and more like vengeance. His victims force us to confront a chilling question. Is there such a thing as a righteous killer? Or is Dexter just another predator, hiding behind the thin veneer of morality his code provides? Let's consider the Code of Harry. On the surface, it's a moral framework designed to protect Dexter and society. It channels his urges, giving them purpose and direction. But at its core, isn't it just a way for Dexter to justify his actions? The code doesn't eliminate his darkness. It organizes it. It enables him as much as it restrains him. This raises an unsettling question. How much of our morality is truly principled, and how much is shaped by convenience? Like Dexter, we create rules and justifications to make sense of our actions. We rationalize our decisions, telling ourselves they're for the greater good, but how often are they really just about serving our own needs? Dexter's reliance on the Code of Harry forces us to confront the ways we navigate our own moral frameworks. Are they built on genuine values, or are they just constructs that make us feel like we're in control? Now imagine you had Dexter's power, the ability to decide who lives and who dies. Would you trust yourself with that responsibility? Or would the temptation to play God be too great? Dexter's story forces us to grapple with these questions, not just about him, but about ourselves. How much of our morality is tied to fear of consequence? If there were no repercussions, no one watching, how far would we go? Dexter operates in the shadows, unburdened by the constraints of the law, but he's still bound by his own rules. Yet even with the code, there are moments when he veers dangerously close to crossing the line. These moments highlight the seductive nature of power. Once you have the ability to control life and death, how do you stop? And more importantly, How do you justify stopping one step short of becoming the very thing you claim to despise? Dexter isn't just a character navigating his own morality. He's a reflection of the moral compromises we all make. His dark passenger may be unique to his world, but the questions it raises are universal. How much of our behavior is shaped by the rules we impose on ourselves? How often do we justify our actions by claiming they're for the greater good, when in reality, they're driven by personal desires? Dexter's journey compels us to ask these uncomfortable questions. If no one were watching, if there were no consequences, what would we do? And if we were given the power to impose justice as we saw fit, could we resist the temptation to take it too far? Or, like Dexter, would we find ourselves trapped in the very darkness we sought to control? In the end, Dexter isn't just a story about a killer. It's a story about the human condition, about the fine line between control and chaos, justice and vengeance. It's a reminder that no matter how carefully we construct our lives, the parts of ourselves we suppress have a way of creeping to the surface. And perhaps that's why we can't look away, because in Dexter's struggle, we see our own. Dexter's appeal lies in his duality. He's both the hero and the villain of his story, embodying the conflict between good and evil that exists within all of us. He saves lives by taking others, serves justice by breaking laws, and seeks love while hiding his true self. It's this complexity that captivates us. Dexter isn't just a man exploring his darkness. He's a mirror, forcing us to confront our own. Why do we root for Dexter knowing what he's capable of? Perhaps it's because we recognize a part of ourselves in him. He channels his darkness into something he convinces himself is good, something productive. Don't we all, in some way, strive to make sense of our flaws by finding ways to justify them? Dexter's duality compels us to question where the line is between good intentions and selfish desires. Consider his love for his sister, Deborah. On the surface, it's a bond built on loyalty and protection. But beneath it lies the truth. Dexter lies to her at every turn, justifying his deceptions by telling himself it's for her own good. His duality isn't just about morality, it's about the contradictions in his relationships, in his choices, in his very identity. And here's the most unsettling thought. What if Dexter didn't have a code? Would he spiral into chaos, killing indiscriminately? Or is the code the only thing keeping him tethered to his humanity? These questions don't just define Dexter, they challenge us to think about our own values. What keeps us grounded? Is it love, fear, societal norms, or something deeper? Dexter's code, passed down by Harry, is his moral anchor. It gives him purpose, but it also imposes limits. Yet, even with the code, Dexter occasionally slips. He kills out of anger, out of revenge, actions that contradict the principles he claims to follow. These moments force us to confront a chilling reality. Rules alone aren't enough to make someone moral. It's the intent behind the rules that matters. Now imagine Dexter without the code. Would he be any different from the killers he hunts? Or does the code merely give him an illusion of righteousness, a way to rationalize his actions? This is where Dexter's duality becomes most uncomfortable, because it reflects our own struggles with morality. How much of our behavior is shaped by genuine values, and how much is driven by fear of consequence? Dexter's brilliance as a character is that he makes us uncomfortable. He doesn't just entertain us, he provokes us. Watching him forces us to ask hard questions about justice, morality, and control. What does it mean to be good? Can a person who commits evil acts still be good at their core? And perhaps the scariest question of all, if you were in his shoes, could you resist the pull of your own dark passenger? Imagine having Dexter's power, the ability to exact justice as you see fit. How would you use it? And more importantly, how would it change you? Dexter's story isn't just about his journey, it's about ours. It challenges us to think about the lines we draw, the rules we follow, and the parts of ourselves we suppress. Consider the discomfort we feel when Dexter kills someone who doesn't fit neatly into the bad guy mold. These moments reveal the fragility of his code and the dangers of moral absolutism. They force us to confront the idea that justice is never as simple as we'd like it to be. And isn't that the real reason Dexter resonates with us? He forces us to acknowledge the gray areas in our own moral frameworks. Ultimately, Dexter isn't just a story about a man wrestling with his darkness. It's a story about all of us, about the parts of ourselves we suppress, the questions we're too afraid to ask, and the lines we're not sure we'd cross until we do. Think about the way Dexter compartmentalizes his life, keeping his darkness hidden behind a mask of normalcy. How different is that from the way we present ourselves to the world, hiding our flaws and insecurities behind carefully curated personas? Dexter's struggle is a heightened version of a universal human experience, the battle between who we are and who we want to be. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we can't stop watching. Dexter's journey is messy, unsettling, and profoundly human. It forces us to confront our own duality, our own capacity for both good and evil, and in doing so, it offers a kind of catharsis, a way to explore the darkness within us without ever leaving the safety of the screen. Dexter doesn't just hold up a mirror, he invites us to look into it. The question is, do we like what we see? Dexter's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Morality isn't black and white. His charm doesn't just distract us from his darkness. It makes us question our own. How much darkness would you tolerate if it came wrapped in charisma, love, or justice? And here's the real question. Would you love Dexter Morgan if he were real? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.